Thanksgiving can be stressful. This year, beyond the cooking, hosting, and traveling, there's politics. After an exhausting political season, people on all sides feel strongly about the results. And while the election is over, like it or not, politics is on the table this year. Amy Cuddy is a social psychologist and Harvard Business School professor. She joins us now from Newton, Massachusetts to talk us through navigating political discussions on Thanksgiving. Amy, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So let's discuss some of these suggestions from you outlined in a recent New York Times article. First, you say, listen carefully. As you know, that's easier said than done when it comes to politics. What's the secret to having a productive discussion?
Yeah, I know that I feel a little bit guilty even saying that because I know how strongly people feel this year. And I know that there's some trauma involved. But you have to be courageous in your listening. Listening does a few things. First, it allows you to establish trust. So you are allowing the other person to speak and to feel heard and be seen. The second is that you're kind of demonstrating a kind of calm confidence. And the most important thing, though, is that you're actually gathering information about what they actually believe, not what you think they believe. So you can respond to what they really believe, not your stereotype or your prejudice about what you think they believe.
So another one of your suggestions, Amy, is don't drop the anchor. So in a scenario, let's say you have Uncle Bob, who's vocal about his support for Trump, and he's seated next to your sister Jenny, who's wearing a Nasty Woman t-shirt. How do you approach that without driving both sides back into their corners?
I would say, again, ask questions. So you want to create a scenario where both people are able to, again, express their true sort of positions and to engage with those. And you might even be able to find some shared goal, some common ground. I mean, if you're really listening, and actually treat it like a listening comprehension test. So treat it as if you're going to be quizzed afterwards about what was actually said, not your interpretation about what was said. But try to find that common ground, because when we can find shared goals, that's when we transcend intergroup bias. And this is actually a situation of intergroup bias. So we need to find those collective shared goals.
Such a good idea to treat it like a quiz. You know, so many of these lessons, they extend beyond Thanksgiving dinner. You have a best-selling book, Presence, and one of the most popular TED Talks ever about how body language shapes who you are. Can you talk a little bit about how less self-conscious signals like body language and phrasing factor in here?
I think one of the things that you want to watch for is body language that shows that the other person is shutting down. So when they start to close off, when they fold their arms around themselves, they turn away, all of those things show that the person is shutting down. They're not hearing anymore, and trust has somehow been disrupted. So if you're in that conversation, it's in everyone's best interest for you to feel that sense of trust going in both directions. So if you see that happening in the other person, pause for a moment and, try to get back on track again. Try to figure out what just happened. You might even say, hey, I noticed that you just turned away. Did something I say upset you? And, I'd like to talk about that. So pay attention to the extent to which people are closed off versus open and leaning forward. If they're open and leaning forward in a non-aggressive way, I think you're in a good place.
Another habit that can be frustrating, and you've touched on this a little bit, is only acknowledging your own position. How can you compassionately engage relatives?
That's right. I mean, the first thing is to go into this wanting to learn something. So your goal is not to win. In fact, if your goal is to win, you're doomed, right? It's over. Your goal is to hear and be heard, to listen and feel listened to. So I think that if you go in with those goals in mind and wanting to model constructive debate and discussion for your children, I mean, we need to do that. We've done a terrible job of doing that during this election cycle. Everyone's talking over each other, fighting. We need to show our kids how to have these debates in a way that's actually healthy and constructive, that doesn't look like, hatred and venom.
Maybe some deep breaths along the way.
Absolutely.
Any last ground rules?
I think, well, a couple things, just really briefly. One, remember that we all are prejudiced. Like, we're all coming in with prejudices. And, I think E.B. White said this very well. He said, prejudice is a great time saver. You can form opinions without having to get the facts. So keep in mind that you are prejudiced regardless of who you voted for. So try to get away from that, step back, and think of it as a cognitive task, not an emotional one. The second I would say is, while alcohol can be a social lubricant, it can also be a conflict accelerant. So I would say if you're going into a contentious family situation, you might want to lay off the wine just this Thanksgiving.
Good advice. Amy Cuddy, thank you so much for your time. Have a great holiday.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, you too.
Thanks.